Hello and welcome back to Euro Truck Soliloquy. I am Annemie, and this is the show where I talk about things that have happened in this week's gaming news whilst playing Euro Truck Simulator and while showing a blatant disregard for road safety laws. For those of you who are new, I'm really not playing the game for any real reason other than to have some moving pictures and to do something with my hands while I talk a little bit. Now today's going to be a little bit more interesting as my timer, which I use for these things, broke. So this is all going to be a lot more approximate than it usually is, but we'll get through it. So first things first. There was some news from Ubisoft, and Ubisoft have never been known to do anything newsworthy. And it comes from The Division game, which I've never played, like many others. And it turns out that this Division player, a guy called, I'm probably getting this name wrong, Matti Hietanen, something along those lines, I think. I think it's Finnish, seems Finnish. And I've never learned to speak Suomi, so, you know. But this person enjoyed The Division so much that they wanted to have a photo mode. The Division doesn't offer a photo mode, which is fairly surprising in this day and age, but Matti wanted one in the game, so he decided to put one in there. And Ubisoft banned them. Now, I'm not entirely against Ubisoft for this. So what Matti did was they used something, they used a sort of a cheat engine piece of software in order to get access to some of the game's internal files to let them change the weather, backgrounds and so on, to let them have full control over their photos, which is, you know, useful in a photo mode. And this is quite clearly not allowed. The Division is mostly a multiplayer game. You can't be doing that. Now, Matti had disabled use of their photo tool in the PvP areas, so Matti was doing everything responsibly, but this was an automated system, I believe, which ended up banning them. And one of the Ubisoft staff got back to Matti and said that they love Matti's work and were going to look into it to hopefully get Matti unbanned. As of recording, I don't think that Matti has yet been unbanned, but they might have been. But clearly this is anti-cheat checks working as they should. You want to have an automated system that flags cheaters. You also want there to be an oversight procedure. The thing which I find most noteworthy about here, and a thing which I'd want other developers to take away from this, is that you want your game modded. You might think that your game is perfect in every regard. And that's fine, then you wouldn't use these mods, but you want your community to be so engaged in your game that they play with it, that they mix things up, that they try and figure out how it works, how to improve upon it for them to try and do things with the software that you never even thought of. You want this to happen. And this came up, what, about a year ago as well, with Niantic and Pokemon Go and them shutting down the tools, the location tools for Pokemon before Niantic had even fixed their radar system. And what I thought at the time, and what I think now with The Division, is make as much of your software available to modders as possible. Provide them with an interface to start doing things with the game. if you are running a PvP game, if you're running a multiplayer game, then sure, lock everything that might be detrimental in a multiplayer experience to single-player sections only. But everything that doesn't directly impact other players' gameplay should be accessible for modders to do things with. Not only would that help support the community of your game which you want to thrive, but it would also mean that you get fewer false positives on your automated cheating systems. It means that if someone is using cheat engine, then they are much more likely to be an actual cheater as opposed to somebody who's just trying to make some pretty pictures, for instance. It's something which I was always impressed with. There was a game that, I suppose, a medium-sized online PHP game called Astro Wars. Sort of a real-time strategy game where you'd build things on your planets and send ships off to attack, and it was all happening in real time, so it was all taking, hours or days, Farmville lengths of time, but competing against other players. And they provided all the data for their game, player locations, and so on, so that people could make their own tools to look into what's happening. I think there was about a day delay or something like that, so you couldn't do it on the fly to see where other people's ships were and so on, but reasonably up to date. And the reasoning behind that is... Actually, I don't know if this was the Astro Wars reasoning, but the reasoning behind it for me would be that, seeing as you can see ships and productions of players who are near you, if you don't do that, then that's just giving an incentive for bots to create a large number of player accounts to actually do the searching for this information manually. And you really don't want your game space flooded with bot accounts. That is significantly more harmful to the game than some players getting delayed updates on what the state of other players is. And that's what Niantic faced, with people trying to get... Essentially, I believe it was overloading their servers, all the requests from the location, the Pokemon Location Finder sites. And if they just provided some sort of interface, none of that would have been needed. Quite frankly, if they'd had the radar fixed from the beginning, there would have been much less demand for those sorts of tools. But you can't predict everything, which is why you need to provide your community with as much as possible. But then, I am somebody who has largely grown up on PC gaming, and PC gaming is very much modding central, as many of you will be aware. Now, we got a few more serious news stories this week, which is a shame. The first of which comes from the game Subnautica, which seems to be doing pretty well. And what the developers did, unfortunately I forgot to actually write down the developer's name on my little notepad. I don't know why I had such trouble saying the word notepad, but there we go. But they had an employee, I think he was their sound designer, And he made some not so great tweets. Some pretty misogynistic tweets, some transphobic tweets, certainly racist tweets. This person, by all rights, does not seem like somebody who might want to sit down and have a drink with. And he got fired over these tweets. And this makes me uncomfortable. Now, I know a lot of people have said that, yeah, if you're a bigot, then people won't want to work with you, but there is such a thing as employment law. And there is a difference between not hiring somebody because they have bigoted views and firing somebody because they have bigoted views. If this person expressed these bigoted views at work, that's grounds for termination. No question. But as far as I'm aware, the only place where he was so vile was on Twitter. His personal Twitter account, not a corporation Twitter account. In his handle, he did have the name of the game Subnautica in there, and I could be convinced that the company could force him to take that down. Because then there might be some reasonable confusion that these are official Subnautica views. I could be convinced on that. I'm not there yet, but it wouldn't take much. But for me, this smells much too much like morality clauses that certainly America is quite fond of, where you can fire somebody for doing something in their private time that you don't want them to do, which could include going to racy clubs, it could include being gay, it could include pretty much anything. Just something that is disapproved of. And for me, corporations, when you're being hired by a company, what's essentially happening is that company is hiring you for X hours per day. Let's say 8 hours a day. That's what they're hiring you for. They can, within the realms of employment law, they can tell you what to do. They can say, hey, you should go out, you have to clean the bins for the next 4 hours. They can do that. And if you don't want to do that, you're allowed to leave the job. But what they shouldn't be able to tell you to do is how to spend the other 16 hours of your day. If you are spending that time... Oh, I'm surprised that did not damage me. If you are spending that time doing something illegal against the company, like passing on trade secrets, then of course you can be fired for that, but that's an actual crime. If you're slagging off the company, they shouldn't be able to fire you for that. If you're being homophobic, racist, transphobic, generally hate-filled, they should not be able to fire you that. If you are engaging in coital activities with someone of your own gender, they should not be able to fire you for that. And it really does feel like a culture where you can be fired for your own private views is one in which you view the corporation as not just renting you, but owning you. And that troubles me. And it's not a freedom of speech argument. It's just not. Freedom of speech is a pretty narrowly defined area with which controls whether the government can punish you for things that you say. can essentially force you to stop saying things. This isn't that. This is much more insidious for me, and I get no pleasure in saying this. The Subnautica devs, by all rights, seem like good, socially conscious individuals. And if this person were on a contract, and their contract had expired and they decided not to renew it, fair enough. But if they actively terminated the contract, then yeah, I've got a problem. But that's that rant out of the way with, and I should actually go sleep. It's getting late, and driving in the dark and the rain is less ideal. I believe that's also true in quote-unquote real life. If anyone tells me that Euro Truck Simulator isn't real, I will fight them. I'm so glad that those crosses don't actually damage you. Let's pick up. What are we even going to be delivering? I've completely forgotten. I never pay that much attention to the goods anymore. Diesel. Okay. I suppose that you should just call us Van Diesel. I apologize for that. Oh, come on. I hate reversing. Think we got it? That looks good. That looks good. When I'm playing just by myself, I would also park them manually, but I really can't be bothered with that here. Oh. More damage. Okay. Let me just see how long have I got to get there? Friday at like 5 PM. And when am I? I've got loads of time for a nap. That's good. Come on. Laments. So the next thing I want to talk about is slightly more serious. And again, is one of those things that I wish that I didn't have to talk about. And for reasons of really of our own interest, I'm going to be a little bit vague on this. But there were some allegations that a co-creator of a very popular game had engaged in sexual intercourse with a minor. Right, I'm not going to name who this is, I'm not going to name what the game is, but this person was alleged to have engaged in sexual misconduct with a minor. After this happened, the publisher of said very popular game suspended him, pending an investigation by the police. The police have since charged this individual, and as far as I'm concerned, this is not of interest now to the video gaming public. That's a lot of damage. Well, I'm not going to get any money for this. But at that point, it stops being of interest to the video gaming public. There's no evidence of any form of misconduct by the company or any form of cover-up. It's... I almost said just, but of course there's no just about this. It's a case of somebody engaging in illegal activity and them being caught for it. Actually, I might load from a previous save because that's a lot of damage. When is the last autosave? That's not too long ago. Let's go for that. I'm fine with the 1 or 2 damages, but that big damage is a bit ridiculous. But yes, it's an awful thing, and if this person is guilty, they should be punished to the full extent of the law. But then games media got hold of it. And I am in particular going to talk about Destructoid because that's the article that I read, but I'm sure that this problem isn't unique to them. But I noticed also on Twitter that the press were practically salivating over this. Oh goody, a real scandal. We have some real news we can talk about, something that's an actual potential crime. And the Destructoid article went on to give the following details. I don't know for sure if they're true, I don't have any reason to doubt them, let's put it that way. And what supposedly happened was that this individual met the underage child on a website which supposedly specialized in getting people sort of meeting up with each other and talking and so on. This is also allegedly a well-known euphemism for it being an escort service. Of course, escort service is itself a euphemism, so we're now having euphemisms on top of euphemisms, and this is just going to get confusing. And this person, the child, they lied about their age on there. And we can argue day and night about whether or not you should check the idea of everybody that you're getting sexually involved with in order to make sure that it is legal. We can talk about that all day. There are arguments on both sides, but that is not the point right now. So this person lied about their age on there, and this website didn't check up on this. Probably because it's working on the outskirts of the law, which is one of the reasons why we should legalize prostitution, but that's another story. But this person lied about their age on there, so the accused thought they were, I believe, 23. Which, of course, is a legal age for sex. And Destructoid published the URL of this website. Means that if you particularly want to, you can go and use this site yourself. Not only did they publish the URL, they provided a link to it in their article twice. They've since taken down the link and now replaced it with your standard same URL, but replacing all of the full stops with dots. And I just don't understand how such a lapse in ethics can occur. Right, this is entertainment media. You're not usually having to deal with crimes, with things that affect people's lives in such a fundamental way as sex crimes do. That's not what the entertainment media is about, but even so, it should be a fairly basic human response that if you see something which is... if you see a website which is complicit in the commission of sexual misconduct with a minor, you don't provide the link of that website. As far as I'm concerned, you don't even name the website. I feel like this could be a case of there not being such a thing as bad publicity. Because the people who would see this website and decide because of the article that they're not going to frequent the website, they weren't going to frequent it anyway. Or they were very unlikely to frequent it. However, the people that are already comfortable skirting the law are probably going to be fine with the fact that the website skirted the law. I think there is potentially also an argument to be made that the website isn't culpable, right? If somebody lied about their age on Facebook and a hookup happened, you wouldn't necessarily say that's Facebook's fault. But it depends on what the purpose of the website actually is. If the purpose of the website is actually to just get like-minded people together and have them have a nice conversation, then sure, it's not the website's fault. However, if it actually is a euphemism for it being an escort service, then we get into dicey territory. And I say that, yes, it is the website's fault. And as somebody who is sex positive, as someone who is pro-legalized prostitution, even though I would never use it, someone who's pro-legalized prostitution, I think that you have to do your prostitution ethically. And shame on this website, shame on this co-creator of a popular video game. The publisher of said game seemed to do alright out of it, though. So it's not all doom and gloom. Now, to continue on with the topic of doom and gloom, the Holocaust. Many of you probably have not seen some of the YouTube ads which have been happening this last week, because I imagine that this being the internet, a lot of you are using adblocker. But I don't use adblocker. I would like the creators of the videos I enjoy to get ad revenue should they choose to want it. So I sit through the ads. And some interesting adverts came on. Now, some of you might have heard about Poland's new Holocaust denial law, that it is now illegal to engage in Holocaust denial. This actually is a freedom of speech issue. Not just because Holocaust denial can take numerous forms, not just saying that the Holocaust didn't happen, but even just disputing the numbers. But not just because of that, but also if you do want to deny the Holocaust, say it never happened, it's a Jewish conspiracy, the government should not be able to punish you for that. Society should be able to punish you for that. We should say, what the hell are you talking about, you complete nutbar? You know, unless they've actually got good evidence for it, in which case we should say, huh, that's interesting. But I feel like there's pretty strong evidence that the Holocaust did happen. Not least the people who lived through it. But so this is not a popular law. Particularly on the internet, as one of the things that the internet en masse tends to value is freedom. We're moving away from the piratical cowboy stage of the internet a little bit, I feel. And I feel like we're a bit, as a community, we're a bit happier with rules and I don't want to say laws, because that seems a bit too sweeping, but general sort of best practice usage of the internet. But so the internet tends to not like things which go against the idea of freedom, particularly of speech. As if you don't have that on the internet, you really don't have anything. You don't... That's all the internet is. The internet is just massed speech. So, knowing this was going to be unpopular, the Polish government decided to try and use YouTube to their advantage. And I'm sure other sites which allow you to advertise on them. And these adverts, they depicted some of the worst aspects of World War II. They talked about Poland suffering at the hand of Nazis. And they were using this as justification to say, look, nobody suffered worse at the hands of Nazis than Poles. The Holocaust happened in Poland. We need to have this law. And it's astonishingly tone deaf. Not just because the internet values free speech almost above anything else, but also partly because of what World War II represented and what a fight against fascism represents. A fight against fascism is a fight for your right to exist as an individual. It's saying, yeah, I don't want my speech or my actions curtailed by a government. That is what a fight against fascism is. Now, that's not entirely what World War II was about. World War II was largely a fight against an expansive state. Right? Internationally, nobody tends to care that much if you're only killing your own people. But suddenly start trying to expand your borders and, oh no, we can't have that. So let's not kid ourselves that that's what World War II was about. But that's what it should have been about. And we all know that's what it should have been about. And so we all know that individual freedom is important. And it's for those reasons that we have to make a stink whenever those individual freedoms are taken away from us. Even if these particular freedoms aren't ones that you would wish to engage in yourself, and even if those freedoms are ones in which you would loathe somebody for partaking in. I am somebody who is politically, I'd probably say libertarian, but not in the American way. In British politics, I tend to be somewhat to the left. And my main driving principle is that the only times when freedom should be taken away is if it actually ends up providing more freedom. So, for instance, you don't have the freedom to murder people. If you do that, you will get locked away. And the reason for that is that you're taking away somebody else's freedom to exist. That's the broadest possible stroke, but it can get significantly more nuanced than that. And unless you can tell me precisely what freedom is being granted by a Holocaust denial law, have to oppose it, and you should as well. It's not good, just like Holocaust denial isn't, and it also won't get rid of Holocaust denial, it'll just drive it underground. If there's anything that history tells us, it's that banning ideas never works. If these people never watched V for Vendetta, ideas... So, if you ban an idea, what will happen is that people will still talk about it, they just won't talk about it openly. Meaning that it'll pretty much only get discussed in a bubble. And bubbles are, of course, bigger problems than just with banned speech, but it's exacerbated in this case. So these ideas only get talked about in a bubble, which means that they get to practice their arguments against people who fundamentally agree with them. It means that their arguments get honed and get reinforced by people who agree with them, making the people who are holding the ideas just that little bit more convinced that they are right, because look at all their friends agree with them. They convinced all these people that their arguments were right, therefore they have to be right. Whereas if we have them talked about in the open, it's not going to get rid of bad ideas entirely, but it weakens them. And that has to be a good thing. Moreover, I want to know if the person I'm talking to is a Nazi or not. If I've got no choice but to be talking to a Nazi, I would rather know than not know. And this law is just going to force us to not know how many Nazis we're dealing with, how many Holocaust deniers are actually out there. Can I get across? No, yeah, but... should not have done that. Not too much damage to my trailer, though. I'll keep going with this. Oh, I really should obey some of the laws. So, last big news story I want to talk about, and again, we're staying in Europe for this one, but we're just hopping across the border to Germany. And there is a news story that there is a game. Imagine that, there are games. It's a game called Gal Gun 2. And according to Destructoid, this is a rail shooter where players fire pheromone arrows at high school girls, making them fall madly in love with you. Along the way, the player must also capture chibi demons running rampant throughout the school. This is done via the use of a vacuum-type weapon, which also conveniently... turning through the years. That is not part of the description, but which also conveniently pulls off the clothing of any hapless gal wandering into its line of fire. Now again, this seems disgusting. And my first reaction, and the reaction of a lot of people, is that, why are you censoring this? I am against censorship. I don't like the amount of censorship that the Australian government, for instance, has done over the years to not allow games which glorify drug use and so on in them. But then two things started to click with me. Sorry, I didn't actually mention. This game hasn't been rated in Germany. This is the connection. I just realised I forgot that. The German's ratings board has declined to give the classification, meaning that stores cannot legally sell it. It can still be imported into the country, but shops can't sell it. And I said, my first reaction was that this is dreadful. No matter how crass or appalling a game is, censorship is bad. And don't get me wrong, this game does seem truly disgusting. But there are many truly disgusting things which people are allowed to engage in. So who am I to judge? But as I said, two things started clicking with me. Firstly was the country. Now the ratings board, as far as I could see, has not released a statement about this. So we've got the country, and Germany is a country which is notorious for banning any depictions of Nazism. Which again, I think vehemently goes against freedom of speech and freedom to assembly. So I dislike that law. And I also reread the paragraph which I just read to you. So you got a gun which pulls off the clothes of people around you, and this is set in a high school. So I don't have any evidence for what I'm about to say, but this is just supposition. But what I'm curious about is whether there is any Nazi iconography in the game. Sure, I'll visit a thing as soon as possible. And also, so previous games in this series have been allowed for sale in Germany. I don't know how similar their premises were. I don't know if they were also set in a school. Let's go to there. But because obviously the fact that it's set in a school would seem to have it skirt very close to the lines of child porn. If not actually being softcore, possibly even hardcore, softcore child porn. And if that is the case, and quite frankly, just saying that everybody there is miraculously over 18, for me that's not a defense. It really isn't. I mean, on the other hand, I'm not as entirely convinced that child porn which doesn't involve actual children should be illegal, because it's not actively harming anybody. But that is a completely different discussion, which I'm also willing to have at some point. And it's something which I could quite easily be convinced on. But it makes me wonder if the developers intentionally tried to get this game banned somewhere, but just not too badly. Certainly before this happened, I'd never heard of the series. I imagine a lot of people hadn't heard of the series. And this seems to be a lot of free marketing. Also the fact that people can still import it into Germany. And I can't imagine import fees would be that expensive. You can probably even get German language versions pretty easily from, say, Poland or Austria. I can't imagine it's going to hurt sales all that much. Is this the sort of game which would usually be stocked on store shelves? I don't know. As I said, I've not really been engaged in the console experience for quite some time. So I don't know if this is some sort of big cult PlayStation hit which I'm just unaware of. But I can't see it hurting sales that much in Germany, and I can see it boosting sales worldwide of people who want to either be edgy or want to stick it to the man, or just like the idea of taking schoolgirls' clothes off with a vacuum cleaner. I think I would really like a statement from the German classifications board. I feel like that would be pretty enlightening. Particularly as the spin which I've seen a lot of the media take is, ooh, how dreadful censorship. And censorship is dreadful, don't get me wrong. But if you're aiming for the censorship, if you're trying to get censored, then I have less sympathy for you. Because, you know, it's what you wanted, you got what you wanted. But I have no quantifiable evidence to back up my feeling that this is about marketing. So, just take my opinion for what it's worth on this front. Okay, we're getting up towards the end, I think. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the games I've played this week. So, I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy XII, and you'll be seeing some videos. In fact, next week will be just an entire week of Final Fantasy XII videos. Been getting really into that again, although it's been frustrating me that I have to... because I can't progress the story while I'm on my laptop because all the video capture stuff is on the desktop, which means, because it's a shared computer between myself and my partner, means that whenever my partner's home, I just have to run around and grind, which is like, ah! But hopefully I should get some more captured today, which will scratch some of that itch. One of the other things which I tried to play this week. So I got gifted Beyond Good and Evil quite some time ago. I really enjoyed it when I played it on PlayStation 2. But I got gifted it a while back and I'd not actually booted it up on Steam. And this is somewhat of a warning for any of you who might look to buy it. Because Beyond Good and Evil is a great game, which on Steam does not have controller support for a PlayStation 2 game, which was originally on controller. Look, I get that there are lots of different controllers with different setups and so on, but at least have some sort of ability to map the buttons yourself. I can't imagine that's too difficult. If it is difficult, then let me know and I will eat my non-existent hat. But I can't imagine that being too tricky. I might try giving it a go with mouse and keyboard, but it feels a little bit wrong, not least because it's a third-person game. I think there are workarounds for it, much like, say, the Dead Space fix for mouse and keyboard, but it's a barrier in the way of enjoying a game which I really want to enjoy. And particularly for older games, you want to put as few barriers in the way as possible, because you're already having to contend with your nostalgia goggles. Not just in terms of gameplay experience, but also in terms of graphics. Because I'm sure, like so many other people, I remember Grand Theft Auto San Andreas looking a hell of a lot better than it actually does. But yeah, just if you want to play Beyond Good and Evil again on PC, just be aware of this. The other thing I tried playing for a little bit again was Quantum Conundrum. I played that for a little bit, a good number of years ago. Never really stuck with me. Came back to it yesterday, played a few levels, and it's like, yeah, this has no soul. It's just been the week of disappointing games for me. Except for, of course, Final Fantasy XII and Dark Souls 2, which I've been talking about a little bit before, which I've been replaying. And Mountain Blade. Mountain Blade is always one of those games which I'm in two minds about. I've put a lot of time into it. I think I'm at roughly the 70-hour mark on it. So there is a lot that I enjoy about that game, and that lot is mostly... Sorry for that hiccup. Mostly the combat. I really should buy another driver. It's mostly the combat. Because the rest of it is kinda rubbish. The running around the overworld trying to find the small patch of pixels which represents your targets, and it's not a good game. But it's got one of the best combat systems in any game. But it's something that I still enjoy for the power fantasy more than anything, and it's one of those games where I don't feel too bad about cheating just so I can engage in some of the bigger battles, although I haven't cheated on this playthrough yet, so that's good. But I think that's going to be a lot for this week. My voice is starting to give way, so if you've enjoyed this video, I'd greatly appreciate it if you were to give it a like. If you've got anything you want to add to what I'm saying, please leave a comment or find me on Twitter at Annemie Plays. If you want to see more like this, then please subscribe to my channel. And above all of that, I hope that you all have a lovely rest of your day. Goodbye.